Welcome back, guys. I'm Emily,
I'm Greg.
and we are from Telltale, and today we're going to be reviewing The Pit and the Pendulum by
Yeah.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Mm-hmm. And Pit and the Pendulum. When was that written again? Do you have no offhand?
I don't remember offhand. I could kind of grab my book real quick.
No, I can find out. I've got a.
That's
This
what
is my memory.
that's what we have Google for. No.
Yes, pretty much. But for me, I make extensive notes in my
Holy cow.
iPad to keep track
If you
of all
guys
this
saw
stuff.
this right now, you'd
It's the
feel like this guy's
entire.
a freak. No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, it was written in 1842 to 1843. And
Okay. So he wrote it within a year.
yeah, and that most of these I have written down where they were published, but that one I don't. So he
Secret.
wrote it over the winter,
One very
and
cold winter.
probably took him a long time to write a short story.
Hey,
Especially
editing is
seeing
hard, though.
especially seeing that's all he ever wrote are short stories.
Yeah, considerably short
That is still
stories.
recording, right?
Yes, it
Good.
is still
If it
recording.
goes dark, I don't have to
I know.
worry
I
about
always
it
get worried when my
going to
computer screen
sleep
goes
and
dark.
stopping everything.
I know.
I worry about the camera.
Yeah,
Because there's nothing there to tell me that it's actually working.
I know.
Or that I'm not being chopped off in the edge.
We can only hope. We'll
Okay.
reshoot if we
Anyway,
have to.
anyway,
Pit and the Pendulum.
1842 to 1843. We're talking pre-Civil War. At this time, the horror genre didn't exist. Thrillers didn't exist. Serial killer murderers were not. I'm sure they existed, but they weren't publicized so much. You didn't have Jack the Ripper. You didn't have
People
Holmes.
didn't want to write about
Well,
it.
I don't know. But Poe started writing about this stuff. He was the first one to write about such subjects, and it took off. It made his whole career.
Wow.
It's what he's famous for. He wrote a lot of other types of stories, as we
Mm-hmm.
have already reviewed, his detective stories and such. But um, he's known for the horror stories. He's known for the horror genre, and he pretty much invented it. You go back before Edgar Allan Poe, and there's almost nothing. There's some weird stories. There's the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which isn't really a horror story,
Yeah.
and there's Castle of Otranto, which is weird but not really a horror story,
No.
and the works of Anne Radcliffe start to get a
Dark, but
little
not
dark,
evil.
and The Monk by Matthew Lewis gets seriously dark, but still never really steps into the territory that Edgar Allan Poe did. He took it a lot farther and created what we know today as horror.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't exist till Poe. And so The Pit and the Pendulum. First, I love the opening line. The first line of the story. I was sick, sick unto death with that long agony. And when they at length unbound me, and I was permitted to sit, I felt that my senses were leaving me. That's how this story opens. And it gets darker from there. Do you want to give a quick synopsis?
Yeah, so basically, this individual, I'm assuming male, wakes up in darkness, complete darkness. And the entire time he's just trying to like feel around his space to try and get an understanding of what he's in, what he's up to. And at one point he trips and he feels his chin hit the ground, but the rest of his face doesn't. And he realizes he's at the edge of an enormous pit. Um, that he
bring up
almost
an
falls
interesting
into.
point. You really don't know that this is a guy.
Yeah, you
You
don't
just
know.
assume because it's Edgar Allan Poe writing it, and you just assume from the time.
Yes.
But that's one of our prejudices and biases is to make that assumption that there's no reason this character couldn't be a woman.
Yeah, there isn't. But, so you don't know, but this person wakes up in the dark and is like, he or she, whoever they are, does not know where they are. They have complete darkness around them. They know that they were sentenced. They hint at they were sentenced to death. And he was in a jail cell, and then he kind of lost consciousness at one point for by whatever means we don't know, and wakes up in complete total darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So this person's trying to figure out like what the shape their cell is, where the save points are, stuff like that. And he is systematically being starved and dying of thirst. And then at one point, he kind of loses lucidity and then wakes up again. And he is kind of bound to the floor. And there's light now. And there's a pendulum with a razor swinging back and forth, closer and closer and closer, right to what he approximates is across his chest.
Mm-hmm.
He's still trying to like process where the light is coming from, and then he's just, sitting there kind of trying to reconcile his own death. And then he realizes, oh, there's a bit of food here. I could get the rats to eat my binding away. Mm-hmm. So he or she successfully gets the rats to eat away what's restraining him, and he gets away from the pendulum. So then he like looks up and realizes the light is coming from like a clear story above the walls, which are metal. And then he notices that the walls start glowing red. Mm-hmm. And they're getting hot. And so they start closing in on him and pushing him towards the pit at the other end of this room. And he's just absolutely horrified, even though he successfully got away from the pendulum that was going to, tear open his insides. He still has to deal with the potential of being thrown into this pit. Mm-hmm. And spoiler alert, he is saved at the last moment. Mm-hmm. By the Inquisition.
By the French.
The French Inquisition!
No.
I don't know.
He was...
No, he was captured by the Inquisition, right?
He was captured by the Spanish Inquisition and tried. And it's the French...
That's right.
Army or whatever it is that comes in and saves him at the last minute.
Yes, the French army comes and saves him at the very last moment. And that's the last thing you see is the walls start to recede. Mm-hmm. And then a hand comes to grab him because the French had come to save him.
Yeah.
So that's the end, and it's a spoiler. But what's interesting, I think, more than anything, is the way this is written. Like, again, that was one of my main points was you don't know what gender this person is. You don't know why they've been put in this pit at all, mm-hmm. other than Spanish Inquisition hints that maybe they were a heretic of some kind. Mm-hmm. But you don't know on what grounds they were called such. You don't know anything. So, like... You want to have sympathy for this character, but the only sympathy you have is for the situation he's in, not necessarily knowing the rest of the story. Could have been a murderer, for all you know.
Yeah, you
don't get any details about it, so you have sympathy for this character that you know little to nothing about.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the whole story, it is very minimal. It is strictly about this guy that's in this torture chamber. There's very little backstory, mm-hmm. very little of his history, very little of who he was or how he got there. It's just focused on his predicament and his thoughts and feelings and his attempts to get out of it, his attempts to free himself, and when he doesn't, when he successfully avoids falling into the pit, he thinks he's going to be okay, but then he realizes no, that
there's more to
was
come.
Just a trial, and so now he has to undergo the pendulum that's going to just chop him up, and and then he gets out from under the pendulum and the walls start to glow red. It looks like he's in a no-win situation, and you really don't expect him to survive, but of course somebody's telling the story after the fact, so of course he gets out of it. So the save at the last minute is not that big of a surprise, because otherwise he couldn't have written his account.
All of it was written in past tense, so you knew from
mm-hmm.
the start that somehow he survived it, but you didn't know how.
Right.
And you don't have enough context to know if he deserves it. Like, that was my big thing through the whole thing, is like, what got this person in this situation, and do mm-hmm. they actually deserve it? That was my big question throughout the whole thing, is like, it wasn't so much about the horror, it's that, was it justified for what they had done? Mm-hmm. And I think that was the most horrific part of it, was you don't know if this situation justifies him being tortured and murdered, basically, in this systematic way.
But Poe writes it in a way that you're kind of in the character's position, mm-hmm. experiencing what the character experiences. So you're seeing this whole thing through this character's eyes. So, of course, you sympathize with him.
Yeah. You have no choice. He's the only thoughts and feelings you're you're there unless you want to try and sympathize with the rats.
Mm-hmm. But the story isn't really about the politics of the Spanish Inquisition. It's not something condemning it or, going on about things like that. It really is just about this character being tortured, going to be put to death, and how he feels and what goes through his mind. And that's what creates the entire story and creates the horror of it. Is not monsters, but his predicament and his own thoughts, and the horror of being in that situation.
It's a very empathic story. It relies on the empathy of the reader quite a bit. And I think, actually, one of the comparisons I make, I'm like, this is like Saw, but you never meet Jigsaw.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
you just don't ever meet, the person who's conducting the situation altogether. You don't get to meet the mastermind. You just meet the victims.
Yeah.
So it's like if the victims never left the room.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you get of the story.
And one of my thoughts, and of course Edgar Allan Poe was a great poet, but this story, more so than any of his other prose fiction, was very struggling with the words. It was a joy to read the words. It was a joy to
It's so
just
poetic.
experience the words. It was
Yes.
like reading a poem, but it wasn't a poem. It was very beautifully written.
It is very lyrical.
Every word worked to the total effect, and every word was very well chosen to create just a beautifully written, wonderful to read story.
And it's a good balance of pure emotion with trigger words that cause the reader enough anxiety to be like, oh my goodness, like you kind of get this poetic, like I'm just feeling like so hopeless and helpless. And then there's just like this pop of this word where it's just horrendous, where you start feeling like you literally start feeling the anxiety of this character. It's really well done. I think actually of most of his works, this is probably my second favorite of his work.
What's number one?
We'll find out. No.
Okay.
I have to say Fall of the House of Usher is probably my very
Really?
favorite.
Number one?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd say it is.
All right.
But yes, Pit and the Pendulum is my second favorite, and I agree. He is very lyrical with the way he writes. It's almost musical with the way he writes descriptions, and he is also the king of run-on sentences,
Yeah.
which aren't technically run-on sentences, but like an entire paragraph is a sentence. So much punctuation. Anyway, but yeah, he's very good at that.
Yeah. But it's a brilliant story. It's a great story. This is one of the best short stories ever written, in my opinion. It's awesome. And I too have always liked Fall of the House of Usher as my favorite Poe story, but rereading this story, I'm seeing a lot into it now that I didn't see reading it before, and it's very much impressing me.
Do you know, when was your first time ever actually reading this story? Do you recall it?
Junior high school, that
Yeah.
would be 1979.
Yeah. Mine was probably my sophomore year of high school.
Okay.
So that would be 2006?
Okay. Yeah, I read it. I
Many
had to
years
read
ago.
in English class. We read. I think it was Fall of the House of Usher. We read out loud, going around the class. Everybody took a paragraph of it,
Yeah.
and we read Pit and the Pendulum and Black Cat and Cask of Amontillado, all the major Edgar Allan Poe
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah, we kind of did a similar thing where there was like an entire unit of basically in one of our literature classes. I can't remember which one, but we did an entire unit just on Poe because he was so prominent.
Yeah. So this is definitely on our best of list. It's already on our website.
Yes.
Look for it there. Our website, I just did some revamps to the style of the site and added links to old videos and stuff like that. So if you go to telltalebooks.com, you can see our full list of what we've decided on so far as the very best stories among everything that the two of us have written. Read.
I
Yeah,
wish
we
someday.
did write all this stuff.
Yeah, we write down the list. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, and that list is continuing to grow, which is wonderful.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that
we're finding
not
good
on
things
there that probably should be on there that we're going to have to work that out together and get them on gradually. So the list will keep growing. So check back there to see if your favorite's on it in the future. If you check now, it probably isn't.
And always
but we'll get there.
Recommend things to us. We really love that. If you want to drop a comment saying, hey, check out this book, let us know. Like, we love that. We want more things to read. We love to read.
Yeah.
I love to read. I shouldn't speak for you, but
No,
I love to read.
I love to
Give
read.
me more
I've
things to read.
The last week and a half doing almost nothing but.
It's wonderful. I love that part of my life when I'm with a book. It's great. So, yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, definitely read Poe.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Read The Pit and the Pendulum. These are great stories.
If you read nothing else by Poe, I would say read at least The Pit and the Pendulum, The Black Cat, and The Fall of the House of Usher. Those are like the top 3 that he has ever written that are fantastic.
Yeah.
So definitely iconic, definitely worth a read. 5 out of 5 for me.
Definitely for me, 5 out of 5. This is one of the greatest. You're not gonna beat a story like this.
No, for sure. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Yep, that's up for me too. So like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.